Hi everyone. So today we are going to continue from our continuation of our last class. Last class we really talked about the whole relationship between energy transmutation and our body. That class was a lot of information, a lot of knowledge, a lot of perception, that we discussed. So in this class, it is more of a practical side of that class. Like I said in this class, I said it before, I said it all the time, that if it is knowledge, if some kind of knowledge and information is only cerebral based, then and it's not getting manifested in our uh like not get embodied in our practice, not get embodied in our experience, daily experience, those knowledge is really just just words. I mean, we know it, but we really don't experience it, and we forget it. Just think about things that we, so many things that we know. We all know that we are already in space, right? We all know that. Then we spend billions and billions of dollars to go to space. It's just the concept, because we almost forget, and we seek that thrust, we seek that eager to go beyond somewhere we are already are, because we haven't experienced. We don't, on our daily life, we don't really, we don't know how to experience being in the space. We are already in a space, we are floating in a space on a solid mass called earth, but we don't know how to experience that spatial experience here, because we are, for so many reasons, but that doesn't mean that we don't have access to that experience. It's just a matter of how to turn that cerebral knowledge into our bodily embodiment, and then we can experience that. And so these classes are really like that. The whole series I'm making with the intention that um to retrieve forgotten knowledge. It's not that we don't have it. We don't know how to access it. We already know, but we just don't know how to know what we know. That is the thing. Okay, so anyway, so in this class, today's class, I'm gonna try to create a lot of different kind of practice, a lot of different kind of how to translate what we learned in last class into much more practical day-to-day based interaction around with our environment. This is one of the practice that we are going to do today. I'm calling it essence of senses. So as we learned in our previous classes, everything that we experience is through tools, right? And the major tools that we have is our senses. So all these things are part of our body, right? All these things, that the apparatus that we use to access those senses, are part of our bodies. And when these senses come together in a more cohesive, more natural way, we it forms different kind of senses that we call either intuition, sixth sense, hinges, instinct, all these things. And most of the time we don't know, we cannot immediately track down where it came from, how we sense that, but we do, because all these senses are working so eloquently that sometimes we don't know when it works, when it is absolutely synchronized. It comes to us as if like almost like a some kind of some kind of unknown source, and we call it different thing. And that, but all these things are traveling through our body, that is connected to not only just to our immediate environment, but the environment before, beyond. So but the way in general we understand our body is much more in a separate entity, like a separate being. And our body is the boundary that we create between us and them.
and that us and them, it can be applied to many things, to different people, to environment, to energy, anything. That is, so there is a constant separative unit that we try to manifest from through our body in our day-to-day practice. But the thing is, but that, as we know already, but that's not really how we function in a, bigger scale. If we, when we zoom out and we see that we are not really separate like that, we don't really access our energy, we don't really receive and give our energy on a separate unit base. It's much more interactive, it's much more almost like a dance, that and that kind of perception and that kind of understanding happens when you zoom out from our understanding of body. So here, so in this series, in this masterclass series, each practical classes, we are going to talk about essence of senses in a different, like each senses. Today we are going to talk about sound. Let's see how we perceive sounds in our day-to-day life and how we can alter it, how we can transmute it. We can sense things beyond border. Yeah? Okay. So let's play something. Okay, let's listen. Yeah, let's listen to this gong sound. I'm gonna pause it here. So you can, okay, see, this is a sound. So that means this is our tool, our senses that we're listening. But when I say let's listen to a gong sound, that means I am making that sound a definitive sound. So I'm giving you a reference what this sound is. I'm telling this is a gong sound, so you may have heard it before. So you have a reference of your own also in your head. So when we're experiencing this sound, we are not really experiencing this sound as a senses. We are, these are very little subtle knowledge that we are going to understand through this practical practice. So when you are listening to this, so you have a preconceived notion about what gong sound is, and maybe you have memories attached to it, maybe you have other information attached to it. So it's not really coming to us as a senses yet. It's coming to us, yes, it coming to us as a senses, but not in its essence. Now I'm going to play it again and we are going to hear it for quite a while. Now try to listen to this sound just as a senses, just as sound that's coming out of nowhere. It's almost like coming out of silence, because we are going to hear it all of a sudden, because now there is no gong sound and all of a sudden they are going to be here. Try to focus. When you try to focus too much, then it get very redundant and then it become a headache, because you are focusing too much. But anyway, just try to listen to the sound just as is, nothing else, just as is, the essence of this sound. Try to capture that. Let's see, when we focus on that, what do we get? Okay, so when we just closed our eyes and just heard the sound for what it is, what happened, it creates a resonance, it creates a vibration, and this particular sound also helps because it already have that vibration within the sound itself. But what happened when we just take senses for what it is without any, without too much of bias, without too much of information attached to it, it becomes much porous, meaning that it kind of breaks certain kind of shells of our perception of it, and it becomes much more spread out. So when you hear this, if you can try again later on your own, try to hear any sound and try to hear the sound for what it is. And as we try that, as we try to just immerse ourselves in the senses around, then those senses becomes much more porous and fluid. Then it feels like when we are listening to this sound, particularly this sound I'm talking about at this moment because we just heard it, what happens, it feels like the sound is carrying you somewhere because you are much more lighter, you are much more welcoming to this sound rather than try to understand it and try to hear it fine, try to understand what is the undertone of it, where it's coming from, all this thinking. When all this thinking and preconceived notion of a senses is subdued, it becomes much more lighter in its volume, in its density, and because of it, it feels very fluid, and it feels like that we can carry along with it as it is rippling around the sound itself, and as it flowing, we feel like we are flowing with it, with the sound. And that is something that is very essential when we try to transmute energy, because in order to transmute energy, as we have discussed that how it's all originates, not originates per se, but it's like all kind of very much core relationship with our body. When the transmutation really, if we allow these senses not to be restricted and not to be put labeled on and not to be so almost like this is this, this is that, when we allow these senses to be, it becomes, it creates a different kind of energy vibration, and through that vibration the energy altercation takes place right at the junction when we receive and transmit sensual signals. Just take any sound and try to hear it for what it is. If we can keep on practice that consciously, because now we are learning, right, whenever we are, whether you're in a room or wherever you are right now or later or whenever, like the sound waves, accept them as it waves that coming from nothing, because that's what sound is. It's like suddenly I hear something, suddenly I hear my cat is meowing outside of the door. So right, maybe she's there before, but just now I heard it, so now she exists for me over there. But 2 minutes ago maybe she was still there, but she wasn't there for me. So her existence, the sound as a senses that I received, is almost came from nowhere. So when we are open to receiving senses like that, it really creates a different energy vibration within our body when we receive them and when we interact with them. Okay, now keep that in mind. We are going to do another exercise. So this time we are going to combine this experience of essence of senses, right, and try to merge it with image. How we are going to do that? We are going to open up some image of some, like I picked some fairies oracle card and the images, and those images are very interesting and very um, striking images, and we are going to look at it same way that we have treated the sound, this particular sound. So what are we going to do? Hold on. Now look at these images, right? We are communicating with another energy in the form of visuals, right? It's a sensual modality. So when we look at this picture first, let's take a moment and just look at it. You might have noticed already that when you see something, it's very common that we react, that our body responds to these senses almost like first is like, but if everybody has a different way, but for me I can tell you what I know, like what happens. It's like first we get an immediate reaction. Oh, it's bright. Oh, it's dark. Oh, it's it's a very visceral reaction that we first get, and that happens within milliseconds of the first exposure to visual senses. Same with any senses, but this time we are talking about visual senses. So you see that when we interact with senses, this may sound very ordinary experience, but these details of our experience is actually the pathway to transmute energy, because all the secret, so-called, of our lost knowledge of how we are embodying our cerebral knowledge into our body, it happening through these minute details that we're going through. So that's why I was telling before that it's not that we don't do it. We already do it, but we are not aware of our doing. So okay, so the first thing that we get is much more visceral reaction that we get. Most of the time when you get exposed to some kind of senses, specifically if the senses is very strong. So right now, because we can see the senses are, it's very bright in color. This side, this side is very bright, and the white is striking against the green and yellow, green and blue, and this one is also very bright, but it's all coming from the dark. So this is like a contrasting sensual impulses, and here we see a very unconventional, very tricky image. So first we interact with these images, with these senses on a visceral basis, and then gradually it happens that we start thinking. Then we start notice different things. Then we maybe start noticing the numbers. Okay, it's 6, it's 11, it's and then you start noticing, oh, there is a rip on his hat. Oh, one of his eyes is closed. Oh, his fingers are a little weird. His ears is all long and angular. And then we notice that, oh, this color, the red color, is kind of shaping like wings. All these details that we get, But you see, it's like almost this visual senses is almost like, it's like we are bouncing off of it and getting all these little details, little information. So then it becomes this information hunt that we try to get from any kind of senses. Same with like when we meet somebody, when we see someone on the street or something, and if we first, like let's say first somebody just walks by, if that person really smells something that we don't like, the first striking, what was that just went by me? Oh, then we turn our head and we see a person who might not have taken bath for 1 month or whatever, and then we start noticing details. Oh, his trouser is dirty. Oh, there's a hole in his t-shirt or shirt. Oh, his hair is all unkempt and looks dirty and soily. Then we realize, oh, maybe he doesn't have a place to live. That's why maybe he couldn't take a shower. Or then we pile up all this information that we gathered from this, almost reflected at us from this senses that we are constantly focusing on because something intrigued us in the first place, which is very visceral. In that case it was smell, and this case it is brightness, the illuminate, the colors, or all these different parameters of senses that triggers our stimulation, visceral stimulations. All right, so but as we can see, we have this more and more, we are getting this information from these senses, from these visual impulses. We still have this, because we are treating it as a image, because we are treating it as color, as something that we want to understand. So there is a deliberation of understanding it. Because of this deliberation of understanding, there is a separation between these senses, these images, and us. All right, so it's like we are taking it. Okay, this is a card, this is a card, there is a number, there is a color, there is a background, there is a writing, there is this, there is that. More we are paying attention to it, so we are getting all this information, but this information is actually separating more and more from, yes, we are getting to know it on a informational way, but we are also, it's because of this information, it's creating its own identity. Oh, this is a card. When we first saw it, we might not have immediately understood that this is a card if nobody told you that, if it is. So we are we are shaping an identity of our senses. Like in the case of gong, if we take the sound, because first we hear it, and then, oh, I heard this sound before, then we recognize it. Oh, I heard this sound at the monastery, and or I heard it when I was doing meditation in the morning, or somewhere else someone was playing in the speaker, on the speaker, or whatever. So more and more information, it's giving a shaping an identity of that senses, and more this identity gets built up. Then then we realize, oh, this is a different entity than us. As you see, we go back to this understanding of our body as a separate entity than everything else. So like this example of this person passing by, more we understand about his attire, his personality, his appearance, we understand, okay, he is a homeless person, he might not have eaten, might not have taken shower, he doesn't have a maid, he doesn't have much of money, and all this other thing. So therefore, if we cannot relate with that, we feel like, okay, that person is a separate entity than we are. So same with that, every time we interact with senses and more information we gathered, it creates a separate entity. It creates, because with this information we shapes it identity, and more the identity gets solidified, it becomes more and more separate from us. So now look at this picture and imagine what we did in the sound. Don't get blocked up with all these details, all this information. Don't get blocked up, and just see it as if, like, because this is not a card, this is not color, this is something that is just energetically in front of us at this moment, who wants to communicate with us, and we wants to communicate with it. So there going to be an energetic dance between what we are seeing and what is seen. So as we focus on these images, let's see what happens. Let's see if we can go beyond this barrier of card. This is a card, we are looking at it, all this other information. You see, when I'm looking at this card in the middle, I'm saying card just for our communication purpose. When we're looking at this, as we look at it, you see, it's a very interesting dance that we are doing right now. As we are paying more attention to it, we are losing the details of it. Isn't it beautiful? As we are just, if we keep focusing in the center of this card, in these visual impulses, we see that we are actually losing all the details that we have gathered in the first place or in the second place from this visual impulse. Then at certain point, we really find ourselves in the other side. It almost feeling like we are inside of these visual impulses. And as we get more and more closure, we realize that there is nothing to be held on to. There was no details at all. From far, we felt it looked like wings, but as I am eradicating all the boundaries, all the separation, I realize we are seeing something that we cannot really make a shape out of it. So it's becoming much more fluid with our interaction with it, with our communication to it. As these details gets diluted, we communicate with our senses a whole different way. We get a different kind of feelings, we get different kind of imagery. Then this image becomes something even secondary, because these images creating a whole different kind of images in our mind. It gives a whole different kind of sensation. It takes us to a land of imagination. And as we go more deeper and deeper and deeper and completely let our body become a fluid, then we can feel even this person. After a while, if you practice this, after a while you will feel that you are in this person's body. And then you are feeling what this person, I'm saying person, but these visual impulses, might be feeling. But who this person doesn't exist, so how they can feel? That's so beautiful when we communicate with senses in a much more fluid way. When we communicate with senses in a more essential way, then we we realize that when we are as we feeling that we are in the body of this person, this image, and we started feeling something. Whose feeling is that? Maybe it's the feelings of the artist who, when he or she drew it, or they, when they drew it, or something else. So you see, all these things become much more fluid and much more expanded. And just by doing this, we are, you see that we already transmuted the energy right here. First, we are looking at these images as if something that we need to understand, that something that it's trying to communicate to, we need to understand. So there is a deliberation of understanding there. But now it's not there. It's like almost like we're in it. See how the energy transmutation taken place? And it all taken place at the junction of our body. Because now we are training our our vision to be more open and fluid. The impulses in front of us, if we look at it in a technical way, they are still the same image. But our understanding of this, our communication of more than understanding, our communication, our interaction with these visual impulses has completely shifted from how we started in the beginning. So this is just one of the example or practical practice, like how we can really transmute our day-to-day energy just by getting into the essence of our senses. And our senses is everything. Through our senses we form intuition, which is not senses, but something deeper than senses. We form our everything, but it all happens at the junction of our body. So maybe we can do this in this kind of practice in our daily life as well. You see, when we see visual, this visual senses, it feels like continuation. Like when we close our eyes, we hear sounds that is constant, because right now, like, okay, I'm gonna give you a soundscape of my room, so that, okay, so when I close my eyes, the one sound that is constant, which is my sound of an AC and sound of a ceiling fan, because it's continuously running. But then there is a sound of different thing that is like almost like arriving and fading away in this vast darkness and silence. But when it comes to visual, because our eyes are open constantly, we see visual in a continuous form. We don't see my computer desk just coming and going away. We don't see my lamp is coming and going away, even though my lamp is not on, but it's constantly there. That's why it's very easy for us to take visual impulses as a continuous thing, as a permanent. But no senses is permanent. So when we experience what we experience in our daily life, if we just look at all these senses, like look at visual senses, is something that is presented to us, that is interacting with us. Because visual senses is constant, when something is constant, it becomes our background. We don't think about it because it's already there, all the time there. But all these things that we are surrounded by, our watch, our glasses, our like phone, our laptop, books, beds, bookshelves, lamps, portrait, everything that we are surrounded by is just a modality of senses. So maybe if we look at, in that way, when we interact with things, we see things differently. A portrait in your house, on your wall, if you look at it, if you really look at it, it may communicate with you, or you may communicate with that portrait differently on different days. What is changing? Because the whole system is changing. Our relationship to our senses is constantly changing. So when you look at this, the transmutation happens based on our relationship with senses. What kind of relationship we are building with our senses? If it is just information based, then it will create a separate entity. Like most of the time, that's the way we experience our body. It's a separate entity. I am I, you are you. But more we go past these details, we find an ocean of details which is unfathomable. Therefore, it becomes detailless. But it consists of millions and billions of details. But we cannot fathom all these details, so it becomes something that just something else. And at that junction, transmutation of energy happens. Anyway, I think I'm gonna stop this class here. And next class we are gonna talk about relationship of focus and energy transmutation. And in the following class, we are gonna talk more on the practical practice of that. So I'm also gonna link the previous video, previous class. If you haven't checked that out, please listen to that class first before you get into this practical class of this practical class. Okay. All right. I'll talk to you later. Thank you. Bye.